Hello, happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I am your host, Michelle, and today is a really nice day, not only because the weather around here has been really awesome and we've had a lot of sun, it's been dry, nice break from the rain, still cold, which is awesome. I love sun and cold. But one of the other reasons why today is so awesome is because I have my good friend Rachel Maiden with me today. She's going to join us and we're just going to let this thing flow and see where we go. But we're going to focus a lot on the runes, her path towards Druidry, and why she's taking that path, what she loves about it, what she's learning about it. I want to talk to her about her art and her work as an artist and her path towards finding that and honing in on her skills. And so Rachel, she's a skilled artist with a knack for fine detail and intricacy. And that was actually one of the things that I first noticed about her in general. She has a great understanding of the runes and the stories of the North that not only bleeds through into her art, but also into the way she carries herself in the world. I really appreciate her perspective on life, her integrity, and most of all, her friendship. So with all that said, please help me in welcoming Rachel to the show.
Thank you, Michelle, for that beautiful intro. I'm so happy and excited to be here with you on your show.
You're so very welcome. I'm excited to have you too. We're going to get into it. It's going to be fun. So, how's your day been going?
It's been good. Did some work today over at the shop. So, been working with wax and art all day. Kind of
Nice.
the dream, right? Art all day.
I was going to say it sounds like your dream world, really. And you're creating your dream world right now, and we all are. So that's super cool. I'm just so excited for you. You've been recently crowned Miss Maiden, which is awesome. So that's really cool. And just being able to see you guys make this transition and vibe together and mingle your lives, it's really beautiful. So congratulations again on all of that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for being there and taking part. It was amazing to have you and Mario be a part of that whole thing. It was so magical. It's just, I will never forget that.
Yeah, me either. It was an honor and it was so cool. And it was just really cool to kind of, it really, I've said this to you before, but it felt like it kind of solidified our relationships in a different way because it was really special. It was the eclipse, it was a full moon, it was just all of it. And it was, you guys did it how you wanted to do it. And that is honorable in its own right. And we had the Baldersons that came up and it was just a glorious time. So yeah, we all got to drive and it was really cool. And I appreciate you guys for sharing that with us and allowing us in on it.
Yeah, thank you. This is a lot of fun.
It was, and it was cold, but it was awesome.
Yeah, worth it.
Yeah. And for anyone who's never, if you've never traveled to Washington State, there is in the more of the eastern side of the state, there's a Stonehenge replica, and that's where Jim and Rachel had their first ceremony, and it was really cool because I have a special connection to that place because our old friend Bud used to talk about it all the time. It was one of his favorite places to go. And so when I found out that that's where they were going to be, I'm like, oh my God, this is special. And it's quite a powerful place. It's really cool. And the setting is just beautiful. So it was nice.
Yeah, definitely visit if you have the chance. It is a very special place, the location.
Indeed. And it's right along the Columbia River. So you just can't go wrong, really. So cool. Could you just kind of give us a little rundown, tell us a little bit about yourself, anything you feel like sharing with the people to kind of introduce yourself to people who might not know who you are?
Sure. I am just myself. And I've kind of always strived to be just myself. Despite my path towards Druidry, I prefer not to have any titles. So, but if I had to pick something, I would have to say I'm just an artist, really. A magician. That's what I try to do in my life, is to really create a magical life and to do that very actively, consciously, subtly, and very nonchalantly, because I think it's supposed to be the norm. So that's kind of it. I do a lot of art, but I have started doing videos in the past year or so, just getting on different shows and connecting with people that I respect and admire. Shout out to Balderson for having me on Odin's Alchemy. That was one of the first shows that I was ever on. And mostly because of his tree. So, that was a big learning point for me. So yeah, that's kind of a nutshell, but
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love it. And you are an artist, and that's really cool. I mean, it's like I said in my intro, it was one of the first things I noticed about you. And I got a chance to meet you on Weaving Spiders Webs. So that was really cool. And Mario and I kind of were just like welcomed with a very open arms, open spider legs to the whole situation, which felt very warming. And it honestly, it's been one of the best just connections that we've all been able to make is with all of you guys, and just getting to know everybody and feeling like we're finding our people, even though like a lot of us are far away and some of us haven't met, in person. But yeah, just feeling like we can groove with y'all, and it's really cool. And so it was really cool to finally get to meet you in person too, because then you just get a better sense of who somebody is, what their energy is. And I knew right from the moment you guys pulled into our driveway, I'm like, yeah, we're gonna get down, it's cool. So this is awesome.
yes.
Yeah. So we are going to talk about the runes, and because of that, I actually pulled a rune last night. And actually Mario kind of pinged me on that one. He kind of reminded me, what would be cool if you pulled a rune, and then you guys can figure out what the energy is going to be and everything else. So did that last night, and I didn't look at it until this morning, and the rune that I pulled for us is Pertho.
Ooh, perfect.
That's what I thought. I'm like, dude, that's great. Super lovely. So, do you want to expand on Pertho, or we can both go at it, but
Sure.
because you're the guest and I want you to be able to share. I know that you have a lot of knowledge with the runes and wisdom. So I want you to kind of be able to take the front reins on that one. So if you wanted to go into it, and then we can both riff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so just really quick, the way that for anyone who hasn't heard it, I just started studying the runes as a means to dive into some of my ancient ancestry, and get to know that vibe a little bit more. So the way that I started studying them was a very organic path. I didn't go out and read a ton of books. I think I've read like one book, and it seemed to resonate with how I was spending time with the runes, and it more encouraged that. So the Pertho rune has been labeled a mystery, and I've looked at it now in a few books, and it is kind of a mysterious rune. Nobody has really quite pegged the definition, though there are definitions for the sake of it. But it's like a cauldron. It's like Gunungagap itself. It's the void, the expanse that everything lives in. It's not really void. It's not empty. There's nothing. That's an illusion. But the Pertho rune is everything. It's what I would consider the Pisces rune, because it's so full of depth. Like I said, I look at it like a cauldron when you put it up. The author Freya Aswin, whose book we're reading on Thursdays, she looks at it as birthing legs, and you could certainly see that. It is kind of a birth rune. It is like a creation rune. It's very open. It also looks to me like an ear sometimes, like you're listening, taking in information. If you want to look at it the other way, it could be a mouth, giving information, that communion that happens. I keep thinking of it. What's that hermetic rule that we're all really stoked on? Oh, where you make connections. The word is escaping me. But correspondence. Correspondence is making connections, and I think we forget the very intimate sense of that, making connections. It is speaking. It is communicating. It is when you write a letter, that's called correspondence. So it's not just saying recognize. It's communion, and that's kind of how I see this rune, is that all encompassing.
Yeah, that's a great way of explaining it, because I too see the cauldron in it, and I see the mystery in it, and not so much the void of like the void. There's nothing here. It's like there's everything there. There's everything in the mystery. And when I flipped it over, that was the first thought I had was like, oh, that's like perfect for us because it's also kind of like the mysteries or the secrets or the hidden, kind of the places that sometimes make us afraid to go into. um, and I think that it's just a lovely place to be swimming. And the cauldron is just such symbolically is so beautiful because it also just encompasses the alchemy that happens in life and
Mm,
the things that we say or hear, just like you're saying. I love the ear and the mouth symbolism of that too. And how that all kind of like it's all about learning and transmuting this energy and then turning it into something beautiful that we can apply to our lives to then better ourselves. And I think that's one of the things about the runes too is like the runes, they're not going to like solve your problems. They're not going to tell you what to do. They're not, it's not an oracle that's going to give you a big description of, okay, do this, then do that. It's like, no, we're here to like tell you what you can do to harness your own power to then apply this power into the world. And that's one of the things that Mario and I will talk about with the runes specifically, and even just the way they're shaped and how they can be drawn and interpreted. It just has that just wisdom energy that's you don't find in a lot of other divination systems, in my opinion. So it's really cool. And one of the things I think about with Pertho too is that it always looks like a pouch to me. Like it's
mhm.
you're like you're able to collect something in here. So whether it be kind of like the cauldron, you're collecting things as you go. And I think that there's something to be said about that. And one of the things that came to me on my walk today was it's like a place of safety as well. I think there's safety in the idea of like a woman's womb, or you're in your mother's womb, who doesn't, it's like that's one of the safer places we can be, right? Hopefully. And I get that energy from Pertho as well.
Yeah, I love that. And something that's come to mind this week a lot has been the definition of rune and what its etymology is. Actually, it was James who asked me if it was related to ruin, and not at all. Please be careful messing with English, because English does take bits and pieces from everything. So, of course, you're going to find everything in English. It is not related to ruin whatsoever. Excuse me. It's actually Old High German for mystery. So Pertho is kind of the rune of runes. It means
Yeah.
mystery, secrets. And that's so deep. I mean, if you want to like, I looked and looked and looked to see if anybody was, you know, using the Roman alphabet for any sort of divination. Could you imagine reading a sentence and then reading a layer deeper while you're reading that sentence? Like knowing, I mean, Chinese kind of works like that. Hebrew works that way. So, I mean, it is a mystery. It's always that layer deeper of communication. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. The rune of all runes. That's cool. Well, Pertho, bringing it already. I knew it too. And as I said, I had a feeling too. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if I like have runes pop up in my dream, because I had pulled it. And obviously I've been preparing for our talk and getting all my thoughts in order and stuff. And Ingwas came through last night. And it was really funny because I told Mario in the morning, I was like, yeah, I dreamt of runes last night. And I was like, and I drew Ingwas in the air. And he goes, that is the rune I was literally just thinking of. When you said that, I'm like, yeah. So anyway, it was just really cool when we were talking just about how, I mean, I see that rune as kind of like a gateway. He kind of brought up like sacred center sort of thing. But I know that a lot of times if you look at interpretations, it's a fertility rune. It can be interpreted as that. But I also thought of that it was cool that I dreamt of that because the two lines, I looked at it as us, like we were
Mm,
weaving today.
mhm.
We're about to come together and bring our knowledge together and share it with everybody else. So I just felt like it was an appropriate rune that is kind of symbolizing, the marriage of this conversation. So
That's beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that rune.
Yeah, me too. Do you have anything, that you, like, want to share about that one in particular or that comes to mind?
On Ingwas?
Yeah.
Um, not too much. I love that it's actually a seed too. In a lot of the traditional, it is a fertility rune. Just because Ing is the last name of a lot of people. Ing is actually son of. So it's not like, I can't think of a good one, but it's a name. It means son of, and so I love that it's kind of a seed. And while you're talking about it being a portal, I learned it as a portal as well.
Mm.
It can absolutely be a seed to somewhere new. Um, that's what they are. They are portals to something new. So thanks for that reminder that it's a portal, because that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah, it has that sacred center, that's in there, and that's also one of the things that we talked about, and obviously that's Mario's jam is sacred center, polar symbolism and everything, and just how when you look at the runes, the polar symbolism is so strong there that it's like it's part of the whole mix of it.
Mm,
And just the way that they're drawn, it's just like the pillar and it's all just a bunch of pillars and they're all in different directions and shapes and whatever and they take form and it's just it's really cool. So we're just weaving on all of this stuff.
yeah. Um, One thing I do want to mention is when I started studying that rune in particular, I did try to use it as a portal. Um,
Hmm.
and at the time, I have also been toying with the idea of the planets and their genders and their gods, their goddesses, their associations, which cultures are labeling these, and what that means. I really enjoy psychology. I always have, in philosophy. So, what does it mean to change those things for yourself? What does that do to your narrative? And so, at the time, knowing that it was not just Freya's rune, but Frey's rune specifically, um, I was actively trying to connect with Venus and seeing Venus as masculine, because we always see Venus as feminine, because Venus is feminine. Venus is the goddess of love in the Greek culture. So, of course, we see it as feminine. But as as a point in consciousness, it can be. I mean, we also say it's Lucifer, so we could say that. But it could be the point where two are one, and they're not, and it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. I mean, Frey and Freya are brother sister, so there's a healthy dynamic of being polar opposites without, during a separation, in a healthy separation kind of sense. So seeing it as masculine doesn't necessarily have to be sexual, unless you want it to be. So I was able to connect with Venus in a very unique way, because maybe I don't necessarily connect with Frey, but I do with more Irish deities. So Ingwas opened up a portal to Lu for me. And I absolutely adore Lu. He's wonderful. He just like makes me smile. So, it's really fun to kind of use it as a portal and be very specific about where you're going to go. When I was studying Ingwas, I painted landscapes for Venus. So, that's where I went. That's what I was exploring. So it is useful for that. You can use it for that. And I would encourage people to do it. Just understand the depth, what that means. I think when we work magic, we think it's going to be Disney and it's going to be sparkles and it's going to be instant and crazy, not realizing that it's going to be very subtle and mundane, but nonetheless powerful.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes even more powerful because it does come off as mundane. And so then you really realize like how much magic is all around us at all times and how we're all capable of tapping in. I love that portal, that you actually used it as a portal and it took you. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And I also like looking at the planets, yeah, like flipping that. The looking at Venus from a masculine perspective because I mean really a topic of conversation I know for a lot of us is the divine balance between the two of them. So how could you have one without the other sort of thing when you really look at it, from that perspective. And men have loving, warm, beautiful energy too, just like the beauty of a woman. Although the beauties are different because they have to be different. They should be different. And the beauty is what brings them together, right? The differences of their beauty is what attracts them to one another. So yeah, I love that. And I really, yeah, Venus is a near and dear. So that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably one of the easiest ones. I think Mars would be a really fun one to switch up. Who's your red goddess? Who's that girl?
Uh-huh. Yeah, the red goddess. Oh yeah, and we all got one. That's for
We've all got
sure.
one.
Whether you want to have her or not, she's
Oh, she's
around.
there.
Nice. Well, to segue a little bit, just a little bit from the runes, because I do want to focus a little bit more you as an artist, because
Mm.
I know that you went to art school, but I've never heard like your Rachel's art story from like ground up as a child, because I always
Ah.
love to hear people who are artists. I love to know, when did you first notice that you had a knack for it? What were you drawn to as a child in terms of art? And yeah, how did that all play out for you?
So it's funny. I've just been painting and coloring and drawing since I was little. I mean, that was the easiest way to appease me. Give her some crayons and some paper, and she is happy. So, doing things outside, my mom used to put me outside with a little paint shirt and an easel and just let me go to town with some watercolors and just paint, whatever's out there, whatever's in nature. I have a cat joining me.
I like it. Hey, kitty.
There's a scratch. We'll see if
Scratch.
he might just get comfy. I won't bother him too much, but um, yeah. So I think elementary school. This is I've never admitted this, but I started tracing a lot because I liked looking at figures and objects, and I wanted to get the proportions right, and I could see the outline of people. If I can feel it, then I can do it. And so, I actually did an illustration for a friend a couple of years ago, just from my brain, just something that I was enjoying, and heard from spirit, you were tracing, because all the lines were so confident. There was fewer room for error. There was less erasing, and that's what you do when you're tracing in your brain. So it was just kind of like, oh. So I did that a lot in elementary school, and then just started copying. It's like I like this style, and that's what all artists do. All artists replicate the things that they like. And I, as a kid, I was very into Eastern styles, and so I drew a lot of manga specifically, not necessarily anime, but I really liked the different styles and the quality of the drawings with manga because it was more free form and artistic and not so cookie cutter. So I found a lot of freedom with that. And I did go to art school. I took 6-hour drawing classes from nudes and thought it was like one of the best because I love anatomy. And that was wonderful. But I didn't finish art school. So a lot of the art that I make is really just what comes out of me. And it was nice to go to school to have some foundation and learn a few new things. But I there's very little that I took from that. Oh, you're muted.
The mute button is my nemesis on this show. I swear. It's like every show I have a shadow and I'm like, that's the one I got to work on. Anyway, yeah, because with art school, with any school, it's like they're trying to put somebody like a very creative person or essence into kind of an institutionalized box. So I could see why that it would be, kind of stifling almost in its own way.
Yeah, it's also a little too expensive for what you're doing. If I actually the guy who tattooed my fingers the first time offered to teach me oils for a very small price. And at the time, I really wasn't set up to take any classes, unfortunately, because that would have been great. But it further solidified my ideas on person peer-to-peer teaching and what's really possible. So, just putting things into perspective. If you want to learn an art, find an artisan who's willing to teach you. You might have to pay them, oh no, but at least it will be worth it. You should compensate people for their time and their lessons and the skills and the knowledge they have to give you. So a lot of it has been stuff that I've taught myself. People who come to me and are like, oh, I'm not very good at art and you're great. I'm like, are you kidding? You're amazing. The only thing that I see you need to do is have fun. Like, throw some paint around. They're like, I want it to be perfect. Get a canvas and huck paint and play with the medium. That's the only difference there, because you need freedom. If you're afraid of it being perfect, what you need is freedom. Do something imperfect perfectly. Throw it around, blow on it, shake it. I mean, pour paint is fun. Do that a little bit, but you'll never be satisfied with that. At some point, you have to make yourself stop. It's too much fun. But you're like, oh, this looks cool. What if I do this? Oh, no. But that's it. Is just having fun with the medium and getting to know it.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that because I mean, I love to hear that you just kind of taught yourself a lot of the things that you apply and you learned, because I just think that that's the key to life. I don't think that we have to have these papers that say we graduated the course. It's not to say, it's not like you said, it's not to diminish a valuable teacher or the fact that it's a good thing to want to seek knowledge and find it, but to have it so structured in a way where you feel as though you won't be validated until you have this thing. I think that that's just part of the mainstream program to keep people going to these institutions and paying thousands and thousands of dollars and being in debt forever, and then to turn around and struggle and then never be able to keep their head above water, and it's a shame that it works that way, but it's like for people like yourself and other people who have being able to see through that, I don't know, it almost kind of like separates the wheat from the chaff a little bit in its own sort of way. If that makes any sense, when I think about school, in the sense of just people who aren't afraid to kind of be like, yeah, this just isn't what I thought it was going to be. And that tends to be the story for a lot of prolific people in general, specifically with art. Mario has maybe told this story, but like he went to film school and he never finished either. And I met him right when he was at the end of it. And I remember him, like, we had a talk one night and he was just like, I'm just not feeling it. I don't feel like I'm like learning that much more. I feel like I want to do other things that are not supported by the school. And like, he just was like, I'm not gonna finish it. And it's like he felt so liberated by just being able to be like, I know I can do this on my own and I don't need the authority of somebody to tell me how to do it or I did it wrong or whatever. Because the thing that's wrong in school typically is sometimes the right thing to do, is what I found. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's cool to hear too you had encouragement from your parents, because that was going to be one of the other things I asked you, because a lot of times, you hear stories of people having the dream to do this and then the parents were like, no, be a doctor, no, be a lawyer, do the thing and get the money and do all this stuff. But to hear that your mom and your parents were supportive, it's really cool.
It's about 50-50. I think when I graduated high school, we were all like, well, I'm good at art. What else am I going to do? Because I hadn't decided on anything ridiculous. Looking back, I probably should have been like, I don't know, into stones or, studying geology or something. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Okay, you got to see that. Good.
Yeah. I think that's true. And there's a lot of things that you're able to teach yourself. I'm so thankful for the exposure to tools. Thank you. Because that makes a difference too. Just if it's out there, exposure is huge. So yeah, for the most part, I think at this point they're just accepting that they have creative children and that's just how it is.
And that's good. That's a good thing to accept, because the longer you fight it, the more strife And that was another thing too. Just to ask you if any of your siblings are artists as well, and are any of your parents artists? Did they have a knack for it?
Oh yeah, all of them do. It's just in very different ways. My dad did sculpture in high school. I found one of his junky marble pieces that he doesn't want anymore. My mom is just a creator. She creates beautiful things all the time. Scratch is going to be very playful right now. Yes, you can have that hair tie. Please, it's a peace offering. Don't get my hands. Anyhow, yeah, they're very creative. My sisters do graphic design and different paintings and drawings, and my little brother's an incredible designer. We would have conversations when we were still living at home together, and he would just like, hey, I just designed 5 spaceships in an hour. I'm like, oh, how does your brain do this? It's amazing. So it's nice to be in a family of creatives, because we all kind of have that we can kind of mess with and hopefully collaborate someday. I'd love to do some more things with all of them.
Oh, that would be excellent.
Yeah,
super
that
cool.
would be fun.
Are you currently working on anything that you're super stoked on? Do you have any ideas for things that you want to create?
I have at least one painting that is unfinished. Kind of waiting for better weather, really good light and space on that one, which is it's kind of a surprise. I've kind of posted it here and there, some progress pictures and some art groups, but that one's more of a surprise. Okay, that's the cat.
Nice.
Hey, maybe not.
Oh,
he did it. He did it.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay because it's the cat. The cat can be excused. This is okay.
He's excused. This one time. Don't even think about it. You're thinking about it. Don't do it.
Yes. Daphne says cat surprise. Yes, perfect. That is exactly.
He's coming over. It's going to be even keel or he's going to get ornery. I don't know. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well, that's Scratch just being like, okay, talk about the runes now. Can you talk more about the runes? Oh, look at him.
He is the cutest.
Dude. I saw you posted something like just him showing you so much affection. Like he just kind of like overtakes you with the affection. It's super cool. There's something with tuxedo cats too, I think, and maybe I'm biased because our cat's a tuxedo, but I've found that they have so much affection and they have like a very warm energy to them. And maybe I've just gotten lucky with running into a lot of affectionate tuxedo cats, but
maybe they're just into host culture. If anyone's aware of host culture, he's a host like deep down, and he's got a lot of sweet.
Yeah, man. And they're always looking dapper. They're always like ready to go, you know?
He's got his gloves and his shoes on. He looks fancy.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. Yeah, Slick says it's collapsing the Babylonian system. Yes, nice.
We're all about that here.
Heck yeah, man. Yep, and agreed. Tuxedo cats talk too. Yep, they do. I hear it all the time.
Oh yeah. He's got a lot of personality. We definitely have some exchanges.
Nice.
So, anyway.
Well, cool. I mean, so in terms of your how have you seen the art and the runes? How does that meld for you together?
It's been fun to make art out of the runes. I think most people at this point who know me are familiar with the charts because I have an affinity for charts, whether it's herbal or anatomy. I just love them. I think they're phenomenal. They're so precise and crisp and so detailed. So I actually ended up doing a bunch of charts with the runes of the Tree of Life. My little necklace, I don't think you can see it very well. It's a rainbow, but it's 9 centers. So that was a huge undertaking, was to map out all 3 bodies of Yggdrasil and then do a final Yggdrasil with all the runes. I have noticed that a few of them popped up when I did one of the Venus portraits, because there's one that's very clear that it's a landscape, and then one that's more abstract, which is a close-up view. But some of the runes did just appear. So a lot of times that's what they do. They just show up. If they show up, they don't always, but learning them, definitely doing art that way was really powerful for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I find that they do show up too, even if I'm not like creating an art piece or something. It's like they show up everywhere. I mean, if you're just walking, even in a city, a lot of times I see algaes, all the time. You look at a building or like a structure of like a parking garage or something, and you see runes all up in that. And that's one of the other things too. I think like the runes are available to all of us, and they're here to help us assimilate to this realm, I feel like, and to help us make sense of some things. And they help us make sense of some things that are super complicated because they're so simple. The
Yes.
simplicity of the design itself kind of is just like, no, keep it simple, stupid sort of thing. It's like here's the thing. Here's what we're trying to say, and look at how effectively we've said it with very little. And you have to honor that. I just feel like you almost have to just give props to that for that alone. Is how many times do we just keep adding, 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 and it's actually you just really wanna just take things out and really bring it back to something so simple that almost anyone can understand.
Well, that's true. That's one of my favorite things in the entire world, honestly. Um, and that's the Pertho rune. It's all of it's right there. And maybe that's part of the mystery of that rune, is a reminder that all of it's right here in this very simple thing. That this all around, the fact that they just show up, life is art. This is Midgard. This is the world tree. You look around. You don't have to go hunt, find it. It's very romantic to think that, maybe there were giant trees and we could find the one tree, but like this is the one tree. And maybe there were giant trees and maybe there is, one or two that are very special, but like this is it. And I love that reminder. Thanks. Thank you. um, but yeah, so that's, art is life and life is art. And the runes are a good reminder of that. Their art is so simple. I think, it is just the staves. It is just all the trees. Honestly, it kind of goes back to trees, and everything kind of is trees when you get into Druidry, and it's just
Yeah.
all trees.
It really is. I know. That's one of the things too that just researching stuff for the show, I was like, wow, dude. I mean, this is it's such a perfect mingling of topics because it's very similar, and the whole tree energy and the pillar and the tree being the pillar, almost like every tree is kind of the world tree. You could look at it that way, and yeah, I just think the symbolism of that is beautiful. And it's a really great reminder that we're all our own tree, we're all our own pillar. And you're responsible for your pillar as much as sometimes you don't want to be responsible for your pillar. You have to be in order to, live your best life, in my opinion, and then help others do the same thing. And so in the chat here, there's a question from Shannon. And she says, I've been curious, how do the gene keys associate with the runes for you? Do they
Ooh,
connect and blend? That's a great question.
I love that.
Thank you, Shannon.
Actually, yeah, thank you, Shannon, for bringing that up, because that has been a big thing in my life, is the gene keys. When I mapped out the runes, my goal was to associate them with medicine, which means that they fell in line for me with the I Ching. And the I Ching ties into human design, which ties into the gene keys. And so that's one way that I can look at it on a much more complicated level. It's perhaps not that simple, but I think it does also remind you of the simplicity. The gene keys always take you back to simplicity and beauty and ease. This cat really wants to play, but yeah,
He's got two cat ladies like right here at his disposal. So
he's like, entertain me. What are you doing? Um, but yeah, that's it. That's the playfulness. I think that's it too, is we tend to look at the Northern traditions as very stoic. And when you read through the Eddas, there's humor. So when we look at the runes, we can remember that there's fun. I mean, Pertho, because it's the P sound, it looks like the last rune. It looks like Wunyo, which looks like a P. So my brain is like, nope, those are separate. But that rune is a symbol for joy. So that association they're intricately connected. You know, the detail, the nuance, the oneness, that's joy. That's where all of it's found. Yeah, it's after some gift and some sacrifice sometimes, but you know, sorry, I don't know what he's doing. He might attack me.
No, you're good. Yeah, you're good. Keep an eye. He is part snake. I mean, that's a whole other show. I do think felines and snakes
Yes.
are very much in the same, have some of the same similar things going on, and it could even be same lineage, like way back sort of thing. So
I wouldn't doubt it. Sometimes they look like worms, but
yeah.
And maybe that's what's at the bottom of Yggdrasil is really just a cat.
Running the whole thing.
Yeah. Messing with, all the roots, shaking things up.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Tangling them.
That'd be a great art piece, actually.
Oh my gosh, that would be hilarious.
Dude, heck yeah. Well, that's cool. I'm so glad she asked that question because I didn't think about that. But we did talk about the I Ching when we were talking about runes and everything, and just how these linear languages or symbols or whatever all have like a very similar energy. And it comes back to that simplicity. And really, life is kind of simple, yet it's complicated, because I feel like we as people, it's like within our nature almost to want to complicate things. Like when something is simple, it's like people are like skeptical, like, wait a second, like that was easy. And it's like, yeah, well, not everything is easy, but sometimes when things align, when you're doing the work, when you're putting in the effort, when you are like going for it, sometimes all of a sudden you do that one thing and then all of a sudden all these things fall into place and you're like, whoa, okay, so I guess that was the thing that was supposed to get me here, so that now the river is like really flowing.
Yeah. And I did actually map out some pieces of the gene keys on my final work of Yggdrasil. So you can, really there are so many details that you can associate different aspects of the I Ching with the runes. They're very familial. The I Ching is actually very familial. What I've started to study about it, certain lines are brothers, sisters, mother, daughter, first son. It's very familial. And something about Northern traditions is familial. It's hospitality. It's home base. So it's easy to see the natural links play out in the runes. On the final, I also included concepts of different ages and periods of time, like the Hyperborean age, the Aryan age, things like that, can be mapped on Yggdrasil. If you look at it as a whole tree, you can see the progression of humanity in Odin, Vili, and Ve, in the three brothers, in all three aspects of Odin. You can find all of those. So, when we talk about certain things like the Aryans, I think they're thinking of a specific time frame. It's not necessarily a specific people, though it would be your culture's time frame. So you might think, okay, well, as an example, Germanics, you might think Aryan Germans would be a very specific point in time. You could have Indian Aryans, you can have Mexican Aryans, you can have Celtic Aryans. And that also associates with the mind. So that point in time was very, very mental rather than emotional or magic based or anything like that. It was more focused on the mind. And I think we look at Atlantis that way, which is more technical. I don't quite remember where that falls on the map, but it might be more mystical than we're letting it be, I think. Some people who are very connected to those storylines might disagree, but
yeah, no, I would say the same to that for sure. That's awesome. Great connections there.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a perspective, it's a world perspective. And if it's the world tree, then time also plays a huge role. I love time. So I'm always looking for how it expands and where it exists and where it doesn't exist. Our concept of it and how it plays out.
Yeah, and then how we've been taught to look at time and how it's almost a source of anxiety for a lot of people when are just living by the clock or, and then I mean, that's one of the big traps too of even just like clock in, clock out, go home, come back. It puts a negative, almost like a negative connotation on time as if and then you can go as extreme as people saying like, well, we shouldn't view time the same way as they teach us, which I agree with, but you can't just like forget about it because time is Saturn, right? Saturn is associated with time. I find Saturn to be very important in life, and there's like this structure that comes with time, and so it can actually help you to like just like progress in life and become a better person. I feel like when you have a healthy relationship with time, instead of looking at it like the clock's running out, you better go faster or whatever, and obviously there's deadlines. Obviously we have to pay attention to stuff, whatever, but I just think it's as so many things in life is it's about changing your perspective and how you look at it and how you work with it and accepting it for what it is and not trying to make it into something that it's not,
Yes. This last week I was just contemplating and people saying be on time, on time, on time, on time. Well, what does that really mean to be on time? You're really agreeing to be on a collective time. That's all that really means, is that you've made an agreement to be on collective time. Because outside of collective time, you are on your own. You have your own pace. Yes, the sun rises and it sets and the moon does its thing. And yes, those things are very real. But how you move through the day is very specific to you. I've talked about this a few times with James, like 5 minutes feels like an eternity for me. So, and that can go both ways. That can be really fun, or it can be really stressful. You're like, oh my God, this is taking forever. Or it's lasting forever. And then you're seeping into timelessness. And timelessness is really where magic lives and lies and is kind of the best thing to be. I think that's the secret to not aging or aging gracefully, should you choose to do so.
Yeah, right on with that. No, totally. That's seriously, that is a key. And I have a friend, her name's Regina, and I love her so dearly. But she just made it into her late 50s. And when you meet her, it's like you would not guess that she's like, and I don't even think 50 if you're in your 50s, I don't think that's old. I look at age in like a totally different way than what I think we've been taught to look at, like, you should dread being old and, oh my God, I'm going to be decrepit and this and that. And it's like, well, that's all choice, man. I mean, obviously there's circumstances that come into play and stuff like that. But I think you choose how to age, and it's like all up to you. And so that made me think of her because she is just totally one of those people where she has this youthfulness and she's just doing her thing. She's always creating something. She's always going. She's just hasn't, she's a really talented musician. And it's like, wow, she's just kept that essence about her. And she has this youthfulness that's really, really great. And I look up to her in that respect because that's how I want to, be viewed in my older days, of somebody that can still climb a mountain when they're like 70. You know what I mean?
Yes, please.
Yeah, where it's like, no, dude, I can do this. It's cool. And, whatever. And so, yeah, Ian says, I'm 55 and just warming up. That's beautiful. Yes. I think if more people thought that way and had that thought about time and age, I think people would be a lot happier too. And they wouldn't fear death as much as they do. And that it's the ultimate end and, whatever. And regardless of what happens, because none of us in this realm fully actually really know, we have our assumptions what happens when that comes. But should we really be dreading death as much as we do? Even looking into the Druid tradition, they're talking about how they'll have ceremonies for weddings and they also have ceremonies for, people passing over, and how they view it as it's a time of joy. Like, you should be celebrating these people, and they hold their ceremonies as such. That it's who said that we're supposed to mourn everybody who passes? Would they really want that? Probably not. They probably would want people to be around thinking about the good times that they had with them, instead of, yearning for them to come back, because there's like this unhealthy thing that happens, I think, when we look at death that way.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, you get to be part of the one now.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
See ya. I'll see ya. See you when I see ya, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so you've been doing the Twilight reading hours, and your book has been, as we mentioned in the beginning, Northern Mysteries and Magic. And so kind of wanted to showcase that a little bit, because I know for the couple times I've been able to tune in, I know I've already told you this, but I've like learned so much from listening to you read this book. And you so graciously are going to share a copy with us, which is awesome, because both Mario and I were like, oh my God, we need to get this book and whatever. And so after our conversation, we were just like very grateful for that. And yeah, I kind of just wanted you to also talk about your Twilight reading hour, because I think it's really cool that you do that. And it's totally one of your things. And you have one of the personalities and the voice. It's soothing to listen to you read a book, and you're always coming up with some really great books, and you always ask your audience, what do they want to hear? And so maybe just talk a little bit about how you came to choosing that book.
I blame the flow state for that. We did a lot of reading during the flow state, making art, and I kept getting all these compliments on my voice, which I appreciate. Not how I ever saw my voice growing up or anything. So it was very, very lovely to receive those compliments and very encouraging. So I just thought it would be fun. It would just be fun to read. Yeah, one big thing that happened in my life was working for a homeschool curriculum, which some people have heard me talk about. But basically, they were literature based, and even though my folks didn't use it, and I've only glanced at the curriculum itself, just working in the company, I appreciated and loved what I saw coming out of that. Even just perusing the forums and listening to what the parents were saying, and it's like, wow, it is really important that we read, and not just read, but listen to each other read. I mean, even through their high school, they were encouraging parents to continue to read with their kids. Keep reading out loud, have them read to you. There is something very powerful. I mean, oral traditions were passed on because it's powerful, because listening, auditory learning is very real. It's deep, and that's actually part of the Druid tradition. I'm trying so hard not to take notes. I am a note taker, and it's so difficult to take notes because part of it is, commit this to memory. You should be memorizing this. You should know your history and everything. You should be able to recite it, even in the runes. It's always, can you speak this? Can you tell me the history? Where did this come from? Who is this Titan? Who is this? All the questions. Can you say it back to me? So, being able to listen is a big thing. And I just thought it would be fun to read. And I have so many books that I enjoy that I would love to share. So it's been really fun to even just put a poll up and say, here's what I have. What do you want to hear? Because I can read all of this as much as I want. But what do you want to hear? Because there's some fun stuff. See, I love that. It's so cool. Yeah, I just got a copy of Holographic Blood, which I
Nice.
loved reading that. There's a lot of pictures, so I'm not sure, but I would like to throw it on the poll and just see, because we did German New Medicine. Twilight Reading Hour gives me an opportunity to kind of share books that were huge for me. Even books that you might not expect me to be into. Like I love medicine. I absolutely love medicine. I'm still learning medicine, but I love to be able to share that side of me and share the things that I am learning, and it's fun. So
Yeah, it's great. I mean, like I said, I love it. I think it's a great idea, and you guys in this in the spiders, you guys are like some of the first people that I even saw doing stuff like that, where it was like, oh, they're having like reading hours. That's awesome. Like, you don't see that very often. At least I didn't in my circles of friends, even in person. And how cool would it be to even just like get together and like be in the same room and you're reading a book like out loud, to the people that you care about. And so we're getting to do that just online, and it's really cool. And so I appreciate it. And I think the first one I tuned into for Northern Mysteries, she brought up Uller, and I didn't know who Uller was, but our neighbor had gotten a cat like 3 or 4 months ago. Like, it was a stray. They found it in like a parking lot in the city or whatever. And she was like, I couldn't leave him in the McDonald's parking lot or whatever. I'm like, yeah, no, so now he's just like a cat who's on the property, right? And his name is Uller. And when she told me the name, I was like, okay, Uller, cool. And then I like didn't even think I should have just asked, but you reading that chapter, she brings up Uller and he's the hunter. And I'm like, oh my God, that is like the perfect name. And he has this energy. He's very warm, but you can tell he's a little guy. So he's getting ready to be able to, in a couple months here, is going to be getting all of our voles and our mice and stuff. And so just the little things that I've been able to pull away from listening to your reading session with that book have been really great. And I'm very appreciative of it for sure.
yeah, thank you for listening. And it's nice to reread that book too and have reminders on some of those other characters that we kind of don't hear about a lot. We're so focused on mainstream that we forget that there's whole families. There's a whole family. We know all the Greek families, but we don't know these whole families. They're names that are unfamiliar. They might be hard to say, and sometimes they are, but it's
Yeah.
really not too bad.
It's not, and that's part of the intimidation, I think. And I know I've felt that intimidation, especially with like having the fear of mispronouncing a rune. And then I would find myself like stumbling over it because I was like self-conscious. And instead of just allowing myself to, well, read it out loud how you think it's said, and then you can learn the correct way to say it so you can correct your ways or whatever. But instead of like holding back, I've found that I just will go for it now and just try and say it, and it actually ends up helping the whole process along. So yeah,
It does for sure.
totally. And I think that, yeah, that's like with almost any language, and it's just really cool to just kind of allow yourself to feel into something and not be afraid of it, for whatever reason. And that kind of comes along to kind of where I wanted to go within the runes. But runes, they've kind of been suppressed in their own way, and I think it kind of goes along with a fear, and they usually are connected to like white supremacy or Nazis and all this stuff. So I think in the mainstream, or like the liberal mainstream, people get triggered by them, I think, because they've been conditioned to be triggered by them, because we've been conditioned for decades, and even further, to have some sort of like fear of this side of history, right? And it's the boogeyman, right? And it's the language of the boogeyman. But I feel like it's so valuable and healing to just to talk about this stuff, to dispel this kind of thing. Because one of the things that Mario had brought up was just like the difference between how runes are perceived in certain circles versus like tarot. And like tarot
Mm,
is promoted just like lights shining on it.
yes.
Everyone do it. It's promoted and it's great. And I love it. And I've learned a lot from the tarot. And so it's not knocking it. But it's just funny to see what gets promoted and then what's not, what's demoted, what is kind of told, oh no, this is evil, or this has this connection to it. So I kind of just wanted to pick your brain and see what you think about that whole thing within the runes and the system of it and how they're perceived.
Yeah, it is interesting. You do get a a lot of cringe if you've got them, if you wear them. I only have one that I went out and actually like have a necklace of. It's the Tiwaz rune because I just adore Tyr. But that's also tricky too because that rune has also been, I don't want to say hijacked, but it has been used by white supremacists. And of course, me not thinking about any of that, I'm just wearing it because I have a deep connection to Tyr. I love that story. It's a very special rune to me. It also stands for justice. So, it's interesting to feel, energetically feel people cringe or put up a wall rather than have a conversation. And then just feel that judgment. And sometimes
Totally.
get treated that way. But, it is interesting that tarot is so big, and maybe that might let up just because I've seen several rune decks. I might personally discourage using one just because it's not traditional, and I'm really like I know that for myself I need to start throwing them if I'm going to do it right. I really need to start throwing them. I just didn't before because I didn't feel like I was in a place where I could. So I would always encourage, doing things the way that they're meant to be done. But I will say that the cards I've seen are beautiful. And that might be kind of an open door to witnessing the purity and the goodness of the culture and where the history and where they come from, rather than just going, this is too mysterious and weird, and that person wearing the runes also looks weird. So it'll be interesting to see how things go.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I can see the seas parting a little bit on it, and the weight lightening on the load of just this like demonization of it and fear surrounding it or whatever, because there's also been like a resurgence of an interest in northern symbolism and northern culture in general that I mean I and Mario and I have kind of witnessed over the last handful of years, even in just things just like video games and stuff like that. You're seeing all this stuff kind of popping up a little more. Or in Portland, a lot of the breweries, there was a couple breweries that came out with like rune based art, for their cans and all this stuff. And I was like, oh wow, that's cool. I mean, I think that's awesome, but it's just funny that all of a sudden it's just kind of like popping in. So I think just like with a lot of other things that we've been noticing lately, there's a shift happening, and it's been happening for a little while. And I think the shift is like really starting to settle in, and we're starting to really see a lot of ways where things are going to fall a little bit more. And I think the runes definitely are going to be getting more love. And the thing with the runes too is like what I think is cool about them, how you said they want to be thrown, like throw them, and they want to be played with and stuff. And I think too deep down, like the runes, like they don't care. They're like, cool, demonize us,
Yeah.
whatever. We're powerful. We'll help you if you want, like, but okay, whatever. And so it's not like this fairy, and fairies are awesome, but you know what I mean? This dancing around this thing where it's like, no, they're like, all right, sweet. We're still going to be here. We're going to be here forever. So, you do what you guys got to do to, feel better at night or something like that. So yeah, but I wanted to get your take on it because it's it's just an interesting observations that I've noticed over the years. Working with them and then bringing them up and then have someone be like, oh, like I went to, I've taken a few rune classes when we were still living in Portland, and one in particular is on a really, I mean, all of Portland is very liberal, but is in a pretty more of a liberal side of town. And some kid from like Antifa showed up and was like there to kind of like police us. And it was awesome. The instructor did a really good job with handling it because it was a very small class. I think there was like 6 of us or something like that. And it was very clear he was there to tell us how we're promoting, we're promoting white nationalism by doing this. Do you know what these symbols actually mean? And blah, blah. And we all just looked at him and we're like, well, do you know what they mean? And dude,
right?
just straight up, like nothing nothing to say, red in the face, whatever. And it was just so obvious he came to be a disruptor. But it just like we were just very honest and kind of what the runes wanted us to do. We held space in the way that they would want us to, of just like, well, tell us what you know about them. And he didn't have anything to say. And so it was kind of like, okay, well, so next topic, and we just continued on with the class. He never came back. The class went on for however many weeks it was, and we had no other issues after that. But I know that even some places in Portland will be like a little apprehensive to like even have a room class or something, because of all this stuff, and especially in a hotbed like that. Anyway, I loved that little story because it was just like he totally got squashed right away. And just another testament to a lot of these people who protest this stuff have no knowledge of it whatsoever, besides what they've been told from their other cronies that are in the same boat as them, which is super dangerous.
It is. It absolutely is. And that reminds me of taking the workshop at the apothecary. I don't even know what made me look. I just was interested to see what classes they offered. And it's a very feminist apothecary, the one that I was going to, but it was also like one of the biggest and the best. So I was like, I have to go. But I mean, and all of these cute girls, they're so sweet. They love plants, and I love being around that energy. I just like being around sweet people. So anyway, I was looking through, and they had classes on Scyther, and they went through the runes, and it was so fascinating and refreshing to hear it being taught from the feminine perspective. And maybe that's what helped, was because it was natural. It was in an environment of growth and health and healing. And they're like, we know, you kind of got that sense. It's like, that this is a deep magic, and it is very grounded, as much as it's like, meh, it's because it's so grounded. It's like, I'm solid. I don't know what you're worried about. And so I think it was so interesting to be exposed to it in that way, and to really sit there with other women talking about these runes, and even some of the masculine gods from their perspective. And I love seeing that it's being exposed in a healing sense. I think that's important.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, that's a really awesome story. That's cool. Yeah, there's something to be said about these spaces where they present themselves as a certain thing, whether or a feminist, herb shop or whatever. And deep down, these traditions, they don't, just like you said in the beginning, they don't want to label. They don't want to be labeled these things. They're not interested in these small details that us humans feel like we have to put onto them, because just like we said in the beginning too, like the runes are for everybody. The plants are for everybody. They're here for everybody. And it's whether or not you're open or closed off to it is going to be the biggest determining factor, whether or not they bring you the healing that you're seeking or what have you. And it's whatever medium you choose. So if you're going to choose allopathy and you think your pills are going to cure you, well, then maybe those pills will cure you, quote unquote. Who knows? I don't know. But if you're so limited, and you've been in such a mindset, it's hard to even like be able to click over to realizing that this is open for all of us to tap into. And it's not, it's very special, but you don't have to be special in order to tap in. And that's kind of one of the things that Andrea talked about last week on our show with her mediumship and stuff. And she just right away kind of says, like, I'm not special by any means. It's just that I've been able to tap into this and understand, like where my wavelength goes with it. And I think like that's the biggest thing. Just like when we realize in life that, oh, I really fit into this groove. Like this feels like what I'm supposed to do. I think just so many things are like that, that if you try and put yourself into some sort of label, you actually might miss something else around you, that actually could be even better for you,
Yeah. Agreed. And with that, excuse me, I would want to say about Druidry that I'm not going for a title. I'm not interested in a title and saying, oh, I'm a druid, or I'm an ovate, I'm a bard, or anything like that, because really it's much deeper than that. Those are like levels. That's your own understanding of your own progress. It has nothing to do, I mean, could you say that is part of a class of people? Sure, but that's relative to time frame. You know, technically, those people were the people who just tapped in. You know, bards and, you know, magicians of that age are people who just tapped in, and and it was a recognition. Oh, hey, you're tapped in. You need to go here because you will thrive. Not not like a high and mighty. Oh, you need a title. You're this rank, this role. Those things certainly helped, but it's not about a title. It's much more about finding a path, and it is a path that allows gifts to come forth. And I mean, there are people out here who probably would be druids. W.B. Yeats labeled himself a druid because it's just an understanding. So, and it's very much like that with a lot of things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, with Druidry, it's one of the things I'm so excited to talk to you about because I know about it. I've read about it, I've heard about it and stuff. But what I've always found over the years is that it's kind of hard to find, like, well, because it was an oral, everything's passed on orally. I mean, that's one of their things is like oral tradition. I know I'm sure there's things that were written down and stuff, but even when you look into certain books and stuff like that, a lot of times they'll say, well, there's not many things that are recorded, or what was recorded is like from the Romans. So there was like the spin on it, or post Christianity or whatever. So it's like there's like a bias to it. But one of the things that was really attractive to me was just learning about how their whole thing was just basically having a deep understanding of nature and her laws, and working with that. And the fact that they were herbalists, they were oracles, they were healers, they understood medicine. And so for me, I mean, I think you're just like perfect. It's like a glove for you almost or something, you know? And so it makes sense. It makes so much sense to me. And I think that, whatever the title is, it's just like we're talking about, anyone can kind of do this stuff regardless of what it is. And I think our ancestors, all of our ancestors, regardless of where we're from culturally, all had connection to this same thing. And they wouldn't have called themselves a druid. They would have called themselves something else, or they would have just been the medicine woman of the community, or whatever it is. And so I think just the basis of having an understanding of nature and how it works and natural law, kind of like will help you kind of get into the area of what Druidry was even like going for.
Yeah, I would agree. And so much of it, I mean, granted, I'm still in the very early learning stages of it, but yeah, there isn't a lot of information on it. So I believe there's probably a decent amount that's destroyed, decent amount that's still hidden. I heard that the last official real bard ever died without a predecessor, and I don't know that I believe that. Because I think that if he really was real and true, he probably did teach somebody, just probably on the sly. Because, the program that I'm going through, even though it's very official, don't put a lot of emphasis on things that would have been important. Memorizing the lineages of kings. Why is that important? Well, that tells you your ancestry. Do you know who your grandparents were? Do you know who their grandparents were? Do you know where they came from? That tells your story. I mean, even I'm reading Women Who Run with Wolves with Rel, and those stories build us up. They're our foundation. So there's less emphasis being put nowadays on our foundation and more on the mystical side, which is beautiful and good, but it's also very reflective of the 1800s, when people were just getting into magic and mix mashing every single tradition they could find. So, there is an aspect of our relationship with nature that does include ritual. It does include honor. That's really, ritual is agreement. It's being hyper aware of the moment, that everything is intentional. And really, that's again, that's one thing that attracted me to Eastern cultures when I was younger, and even appreciative now, is that everything is viewed as a ritual. Go through your day as if everything you are doing is a ritual. Everything you're doing is an art. Change ritual out with art and see what happens. The Druids now, as a class, as a grade, are the philosophers, and that's how it was able to survive, was because they were like, oh, well, we can't practice this stuff. That's fine. We'll just meet in the woods and talk. I mean, everyone's like, oh, Plato, all these people. Who were they? They were philosophers. That's who the Druids were. Could they curse you with their words? Yes, because they understood language, and the power of words. I grew up in the church. The Bible talks about cursing. Watch your words. Watch what's coming out of your mouth, because there's power there. So is there a very magical, mystical aspect to it? 100%. But I think the way that it's portrayed is very romantic, and it can be that, and it can be fun. I mean, shoot, putting a robe on and doing a ritual, it is fun. It is. And I've had some laughs, and you don't have to be serious. I think nature and the gods, our ancestors, it wants to play, and magic is in play. So when you're having fun, it's going to work.
Heck yeah, man. I agree. I totally agree. And I think we get lost in the seriousness. And Andy and I talked about this too last week, of just like, that was one of the things about her art that I noticed, that there's like a playfulness that really comes through, and I remember just seeing that and feeling that playfulness and being like, yeah, dude, we need more of that, because the seriousness, it really is awesome when it's needed and when it's called for. But yeah, to be able to just allow yourself to flow, so many more things come out, and it's just life becomes more joyful. And who doesn't want that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the goal. Why do we look at the things like hero's journey and all that stuff, right? Not just to combat challenges. I mean, that's a given. But we look at heroes because it gets us excited to combat. It gets us excited. It's fun. It's fun. And I think we forget that when we look at signs like Aries and the warrior. We think stoic samurai. We don't think, or whatever, centurion. We think all kinds of things, but we don't think fun all the time. And that's, I think, where we're missing it, is that the battles are supposed to be fun. One of my favorite scenes in Vikings was in the first season. On their first voyage out away, they're on the ship, and the boatmaker's on the ship, Floki, and it's storming, and everyone is panicked. They're like, we're gonna die. The gods are angry at us. And he looks around, and he starts laughing. He's like, no way. No way. The gods love this ship. Are you kidding me? Thor is going crazy. He's doing this for us. He's challenging us because they love us. And it shifted the whole voyage. Because the minute you despair is when you sink. And his joy was, there was nothing conniving, or, he wasn't like, oh, I should cheer everyone up. It was so pure, the purity of that character in that moment. Like, oh no, this is good. And letting that be contagious. That's what makes the journey fun, is when you're so full of love and joy that it's contagious. Like, that's the goal. What else is it all for? Why would you even learn wordsmithing if your words aren't going to be contagious?
Dude, right on. Yeah, you gave me chills when you replayed that scene, like straight up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. Well, too, and it reminds me of just the we feel each other's energy. That's one of the beautiful things I think about humans, is that we are able to pick up on this energy, animals too, and other creatures and things like that. But when you have somebody that's in your field that is negative or very just like not doing so hot or whatever, and all they do is spouting this negative vibration and whatever. I mean, dude, that yeah, just as easily as joy can be spread, that negativity can be spread too. And so like you said, as soon as you start to despair, you sink. And it's this slippery slope, freaking downward spiral kind of thing, and it can happen fast, and then you're in it and you almost are so spun up in it that you can't see what you're doing, and you don't realize how much it actually does affect not only yourself but everything around you, and all of the things that happen, and all the places you go, and the people you interact with, and the people you meet, and ultimately what you attract. And I think that's like one of the bigger lessons that I've learned from shifting my mindset in that direction, is just seeing the total difference of what actually comes in when you start to look at life that way, from a more like joyous, positive perspective, as opposed to everything's wrong or this more nihilistic kind of nothing matters sort of whatever kind of view. And seeing like the magic in everything, it like turns your life into more of a magical existence, really.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. That's so true. And even the runes are like that too. You
Mm,
know, they really are. Um,
yeah,
just the fact that there is a whole rune for joy. It's not
totally.
that you don't see anything that's going on. It's not that you don't acknowledge, oh, that could bring me down, or that's not good. It's not that you don't see anything. It's just choosing your response and choosing to see the joy in it. And that's really where the concept of luck comes in. You know, when
Mm,
you're in flow, then you have luck. It's it's that simple. And it might
right.
work different ways for different people because we all have our own flow. But being in joy, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, totally. And it's not even to be, trying to, not even from like a new agey perspective where it can become all this. "Ugh," and I know you're not, I
Yeah.
know you see that. And that's one of the things I love about you too, is that it can easily be taken to the other side where it becomes this head in the clouds sort of thing, being so disconnected that you lost your groundedness, which then in turn like sweeps you up into this whole other weird place that can do a lot of damage actually.
Yeah, it absolutely can. Yeah, being overwhelmed is nothing good.
Mm, mm-mm.
Actually, I was just talking with Balderson about that when we were reading the Havamal. We've started that again, so be on the lookout for those episodes. We
Woo!
are trying to get through it so we can read other things. We still have the rest of the eddas to go through. But there are some passages there that talk about, when you're in the middle of the battle, don't look up. Don't look up for anything. Whether it's a sound, whether it's a god, nothing. Just don't look up. Don't look away from. Stay focused. It's
Yep.
powerful.
It is powerful.
That's
And
all.
I also think that that's one of the lessons of the runes as well, is focus. And
Mhm.
because when you look at how they're shaped and everything, to me, it also it takes focus to draw them, because yeah, you can quickly draw a rune, no problem, just like you can quickly write a word. But look at the difference that happens when someone sits down, takes the time to like craft out a letter, with handwriting, with intention. And then the same thing is with the runes. You can make very sharp angles, which a rune wants. They want a sharp angle, because that's one of the other things too I wanted to kind of bring up, is just the whole thing of angles and how important they are in life. But I think like with the runes, it is all about angles. It's all about the sacred center pole, and the angles that come from that sacred center. And so we have a good friend, her name is Christy, and she was the first person that brought that to my attention a few years ago. Just like she's like, I'm looking at these runes and I'm just like, it's all angles. It's all about angles. And then when you start looking even at like a zodiac wheel, each of these 12 wedges, or however you look at it, it's all about a certain angle. And then I go as far even to start thinking about one of the women I've studied with. Her name is Ingrid Kincaid in
Mhm.
Portland, and she talks about the runes. Actually, she thinks that the original constellations may have actually been runic, and that we've kind of been conditioned to maybe like think that the runes aren't part of the sky in some way, but they actually have been there the whole time. And then we have the zodiac and the constellations that come with that too, and beyond even the zodiac constellation. So have you ever thought about that, like runes as constellations?
No, and I love that you did bring that up. It reminds me, I have thought about it as a tree. Okay, so back in a little bit, when I was learning these, I did them just set by set. And so I had a sticky note, because I love sticky notes. I had a sticky note with the runes on my door that I would pass every day and just memorize them and just see them. And one day I thought, Odin's hanging upside down looking at these. So these are actually roots. And all of them should be flip-flopped if we're going to be looking at them the right way, right? So, I have looked at trees before, and if you look, you can see offshoots, you can see fehu, you can see different, ansus, you can see all kinds of different runes in trees. But I love the constellation idea, because especially like, oh, I wonder if we drew them upside down and put them in the sky, like that might be fun to look at it that way, because constellations would have been very different for the people of the North. Just this week, we were looking at Stellarium, which gives you the option to view the sky in different cultures and seeing which ones look similar and which ones don't. They don't all look similar. Nobody puts the stars together the exact same way in every single culture. Newsflash. So it would be really fun to give yourself a challenge on not only making your own constellations, but it might be fun to look for the runes. I mean, there's 24 of them. I might look at the younger Futhark. I think that's important. So, that's even fewer. What would that do to your time? And the way that you keep it, and the way you view the seasons and have a relationship with the seasons. Because, right, as above, so below, the Greeks put their memory in the stars. Not everything's written down on stone or paper. Why would you do that when it's right there? Your story is right there. That's all you need to remember who you are, is that. So if we change our view and recognize ourselves, that we're actually telling a very different story. I don't tell the story of Medusa when I look into the sky. Why would I? But I recognize it and see how it's played out, because many people are. So, it would be fun to do runes in the sky.
I agree. And
line up.
yeah, I think it's really cool. I love that connection with the tree that you bring up. Because yes, you can see the runes in the trees. And also too, I mean, I am always, I'll be walking through the forest or whatever, and there's like fallen branches, and I'm like, oh, there's Gabo, or oh, I see algae in the branch, and there it is. And you just start tapping into all this stuff, and then you start looking in the forest, and it's just like I was saying in the beginning, with you look at a building and it's like, oh, okay, I see algae, or whatever you see. Issa, it's just like it's everywhere. It's all around us. And I also love the practice of, doing like standing as a rune, and just kind of like thinking of that rune and making the formation with your own body. And you're just like bringing in that energy. And obviously some of the, you're like, like going like this and shit. But I mean, it's fun to just kind of see what happens and where your mind goes with it. And so anyway, yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I love thinking it that way. And yes, I would love to do some sort of rune working with the stars. I think that there's something to it, because how could they not have seen them in the stars? Like, just like you said, it's like they would have to have maybe even focused on that, and what time of year was Berkana in the sky for them? What did that mean when Berkana showed up in the sky? I would love to even just like create that own story for ourselves right now, and just what does it mean to us? So very cool.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea.
And you brought up the 24 runes, so Elder Futhark. What is your opinion on the Anglo-Saxon Futhark with the 33?
Ooh, 33.
There's an extra 9. So, and now this side of it, because I always in the beginning, right from the start when we started studying them, I always was with like the 24 runes. And then I did take a class with Ingrid, as I mentioned, and she goes off of the 33. Now, I always had some sort of conflict with it because I'm not sure if it totally resonates with me. I'm not sure. She thinks that the extra 9 are literally from like, they're like the giants, like the giant runes. So I don't know. I wanted to pick your brain and see if you've heard of that or thought of it, or if you have any sort of opinion on it.
I have not really dived into those quite
Okay.
yet. The younger Futhark was on my list just because I don't want to be a snob. I, and I did get some nudging in a dream to study them. It was like, hey, you're really not really honoring these traditions if you're not looking at everything. Because I think that's easy for people to be like, the Elder Futhark's the only true one, and things evolve, they change, they grow. Did you learn nothing from the runes? So
right on.
So I think 33 would be amazing. I'd be very interested to see what's included, what remains, and what that time frame was. I think that would be very fascinating.
Yeah, I'll send you some stuff on it because when I first came across it, like I said, it was through our friend Christy and then Ingrid. And I was like, oh, really? Like there's a whole, I had no idea. And, I was on the fence with them and I was taking her course. And one of the things I loved about her course was that at the end of each class, everybody would pick a rune, pick their own rune. And then that was the rune that you were to go home with and then study for the week and then come back the next week and whatever. And so, just like with plants, I do the same sort of meditation where I like go into the rune. And I know I've heard you talk about this, and there's other people that do this type of meditation. It's not like I'm the only one that's done it or whatever, but I find that it's really effective. And I think a lot more comes to me. And the rune I had picked is Yr, which is just YR. And I was like, okay, so it's one of the 9. I'm not totally familiar. So I'm just going to sit with this and let whatever come through. And I had one of the more powerful meditations with runes that I've ever had. And I was thinking to myself, like, whoa, like my sense was there is something very ancient and deep inside of this that I'm supposed to be looking at. Kind of like you've gotten a hit of like, okay, there's something here. To the point where it's like a huntress rune. It's about having your bow and pulling it back, but being confident with it. And like the thought of basically hunting for survival and not sport. And my whole meditation was based on me like literally having a sleigh with a reindeer and I was out like hunting an elk.
Oh,
And
cool.
in the meditation was like hesitant because I thought to myself in the meditation, I was like, how am I going to get this elk on the sleigh? And I just heard from my guides or spirit or whoever, or the rune itself of like, don't think about that. That's your target. And just like pulling back the bow, releasing, getting the elk. And I managed to get it on the sleigh and I brought it back to a hut. And inside the hut was my grandfather and his father.
Wow.
And he looked at me and he said, you hunted this elk for us. And he kissed me on the forehead. And it was like, whoa. I mean, it just totally blew my mind. And so ever since that point, then I was like, okay, I don't know like what my waking opinion is on these and my skepticism or whatever, where they come from, where's the source, maybe needs to be brought down a bit so that I can actually just, enjoy them for what they are and not question so much, all these other things about it. So I think that there'd be a lot of wisdom in them for you. And like I said, I'll send you some stuff, just even like images of them and you can, do what you will with them. So.
Yes, please. That is a beautiful story. I love that.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, it blew my mind. And
I
I
look him up.
Oh yeah, no, go for it. Yeah, please do. And it's cool. And I encourage other people out there to look them up and take from them what you will, or make your own opinions and feel it out. But Yeah, and I remember I recited that story in the class, and Ingrid, she just looked at me, she goes, "Okay, I think you learned about that rune." I was like,
Right? Nailed
I
it.
think I did. I think the rune had something there for me, and, yeah, but the whole connection with my grandfather and his father, that
Mm,
really solidified it for me, where it felt as though I reweaved some sort of web for them in the astral even, or for our family in general by getting that elk. It was really cool. So,
that's beautiful. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
it's a good one. So, and then kind of on the same not same thread, but I wanted to ask your opinion about bind runes. And
Oh,
do you work with them? Do you like to work with them? And what's been your experience with them?
I'm still in the frame of keep it simple, stupid. So I have worked with bind runes before. I don't know that I saw a ton come from it. I tend to lean a little bit with Jackson Crawford on them, that they are a word choice and putting different letters together, because that tends to be the only time that they're seen historically, is to put different letters together for whatever reason. So on one hand, very mundane, just like TH, we put that together. Um, but on the other hand, I think they are powerful and they are very beautiful. And, I do enjoy working with them. I just don't work with them very often. Mostly because anytime I try to do things, the universe reminds me to keep it simple. And so oftentimes, if there's a rune that I'm really feeling drawn to, that's the one I need to work with. And I may not need to add anything to it at all. It feels excessive and it feels
Oh, we got a
clunky. Yeah.
oh, okay. We
Oh, I
lost you
saw
right
that.
there. That's
Oh
okay.
no.
You
Yeah, but I do think they're useful sometimes. And they're pretty. They're very cool.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think they're useful sometimes, and I think they have their place because I do like the simplicity of having a single rune, and then I think, like, if you're really having to bring in something, strongly, like protection or something like that, I think that obviously there's runes that are protective just on their own, but I think that depending on the type of protection you're seeking, a bind rune could really, like, step that up,
Yeah.
in a big way. And I think there's a challenge with bind runes too. I think there's a challenge in drawing them in the way where the angles meet up properly. You know what I mean? And so I think that they're almost yeah, they're like they want the challenge. They want to see you kind of even like figure out, it's like a puzzle almost. Like, how are you going to draw this? And you do have to think about it a little bit more, and be more intentional, which is one of the reasons I do like them. And as I said, I too don't I'm not often drawing all different types, but I do have my own bind rune that I like am very like connected to. Um, and that's kind of like where I keep that as well, but open to kind of like, blending them at some point. Cause too, one of the things that Ingrid had also brought to my attention was just like the runes, like they want to be on their own. They're like almost like they're all unique individuals. So sometimes even to bind them is like almost something that they might, not that they don't want that, but maybe don't need that or something. Anyway, just a different thought. I know there's all different schools of thought on it.
Yeah, though that makes sense. Especially, I mean, and you've heard the Heilung track. There are, and Odin talks about it, spells for unbinding things.
Ah, yes.
So as much as you might bind something, I mean, think about what you're doing with the runes. You might tie them all together in the way that you put stagecoach horses together. You want them all to run together, but at the same time, you are limiting what they do. You're controlling what they do, and they're like, I just want to be me. They're like, don't tell me what to do. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go this way and direct your life thus, because who can control their weird? You know, maybe that's part of it too, is the weird. When we bind them, we're putting a knot in the weird and we're saying we want the weird to flow this way, and it could have different results. Some of them might be very effective. Tying a knot could keep things from sliding down. It could keep things in place. It could save you, but it could also stop things up. So it's just maybe even taking it at that angle is thinking of the weird and thinking of knots and weaving and tying, because that's a huge part of this stuff too. We think of the Norns who weave fate, and we weave our fate when we speak to each other and when we change vibrations and when we take action. So, maybe it also ties into that. While you were talking about that, I did also imagine, with the angles, cross stitch, and how easy it would be to put spells and blessings into clothing. One thing that Freya Aswin talks about in her book is using the Berkana rune for protection with children. And it would be so easy just to stitch a little bee in there, a couple little bees,
Oh,
something. So,
yeah.
it'd be so easy to decorate yourself with poetry, in a sense.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And yeah, I mean, it does remind me of when Mario first started looking into the runes and he carved no, did he carve it? I can't remember if he carved it in or if he just put it into his boot, but he basically had a rune that he wanted to work with and charge. And so he was like, I'm going to put it in my boot. And with every step, I'm basically like charging this rune and I'm bringing this in. And you can do that with you can do it with a stone, you can do anything, a plant, whatever, an amulet that you want to make or you carry with you. And you're just going to be constantly charging that up, and I just think that there's like beauty in that. And so yeah, why not put that into the clothing of your children or somebody who you want to have more protection. And that reminds me of have you ever seen the movie Phantom Thread?
No.
It's a beautiful one, and I'm the director is escaping me. And it's one of Mario's favorite directors. But I'm not good with remembering that kind of stuff. But the movie Phantom Thread is beautiful, and one of the things, it's about a dressmaker, and it's about kind of
Ooh.
that same concept of what you're talking about, of putting these intentions into the clothing that he was making, and he did it in his own special way. But the story of it is really great, and it brings up it was a great movie for me. It actually like really I connected with it really deeply, and I found I saw similarities in myself in one of the main characters, and it was just really beautiful. And I highly recommend that film for anybody who's kind of into that sort of thing. But yeah, putting the intention right into his clothing, and yeah, it was cool. It's a good one. It came out a handful of years ago, I think, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago or something like that.
Mm. I love that. I'm gonna check that out. That is one of my favorite things to do is enchant things, and using runes and doing things like that is an easy way to practice enchantment.
Yeah, for sure. And so going on the druid tip or trip, whatever you want to say, I was looking into Barbara Walker. She's one of the people I always kind of use her reference books when I'm basically kind of researching almost anything. But I looked in her section of the druid for druid, and she was talking about how originally all the druids were priestesses, and it wasn't until later that like druidry was actually even like, I don't know if you want to say allowed men in, or priests became more of a thing. Do you know anything about that, or can you expand on that idea at all?
I have not heard anything like that yet. It wouldn't surprise me to hear something like that, because I think that's a narrative that goes around often in a lot of circles, that it was only women doing these things for a certain time for whatever reason. Um, I think I wouldn't be surprised to hear that, or an
Yeah,
angle of it.
I could see it. And I always keep in mind with Barbara is that she's more on the feminist side of things. So I always kind of I appreciate her perspectives, but I always remember like she does come from that school of more of like the woman studies sort of thing. So she's more centered around that thought. But I wondered about it just because if we were a matriarchal society at one point,
Mm,
was it that the arch druid was a woman? Because one of the cool things also about the druidry stuff is how highly regard how sorry, they put mistletoe, like they regarded it very highly. And it was said that arch druid was the one that would harvest it, and they used a golden sickle.
Mm,
And the whole thing was that they didn't, and I've even heard this, I've heard other herbalists talk about this, but making sure to not allow the plant, in this case mistletoe, actually hit the ground, because there's something
mhm.
about like it taking away the magnetism that is in that act of like harvesting it directly from the tree. um and stuff like that. And so that was one of the other things I just wanted to bring up and see what you thought about, specifically with the mistletoe. And I just love the golden sickle and all of that.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of how there's a lot of emphasis in more Celtic and Gaelic traditions of women being in power. Caradwyn is a great one. A lot of people will read about her. She's kind of a big name. Um, Definitely look into her story. But a lot of rivers are named after goddesses, things like that. So it is a very goddess-centric tradition. Um, I love that tradition with the mistletoe involves not letting it touch the ground. I do put stock in that because I do think that there's something very special about this plant, that it's a little parasitic. It grows on other plants. It's like orchids. Orchids grow on other plants, right? It grows on a tree. So the fact that you harvest it while it's in the air, it's of the earth, but it's in the air, and you don't let it touch the ground is amazing. You'd want to keep that magic about it. I think it's very special. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a thing. Um, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was, a time of very matriarchal tradition in the North that has just been lost, or not talked about so much, just because we're used to putting women on a pedestal and only looking at goddess culture. And if we're going to see them as our ancient ancestors, maybe we need a different word for the gods, because
Ah.
one thing that I've thought about a lot this week is we don't call the Canaanites gods, we don't call Cain and Abel gods, but if we look at the time period of, progeny, they would be. I mean, who's beginning? You have Adam, you have Eve, you've got Ask and Embla. So those, obviously, they would be demigods, they would be gods. We just don't talk about them that way in those traditions. So really, we're kind of tripping ourselves up by putting people on pedestals, putting our ancestors on pedestals, even if the time frame allowed for very mighty beings to exist. I think that's something Druidry calls them, is mighty beings. And that's what it's not really ascending to, but it is something you're growing into. You grow into becoming a mighty being. That's where magic is a norm for you. You have crazy strength because it's a norm for you. You're meant to be a mighty being. So I guess it wouldn't surprise me, but I would love to hear more of it in maybe a less feminized platform. Because most of the time when I hear them, they're very anti-men, and men are so stupid. They had no idea they were part of procreation. I'm like, how wouldn't you know? Were you not? Where were you for this? Like, come on. So
Yeah.
some of the stuff is a little slanty. Some of it's very beautiful. I appreciate the appreciation for women in power and what societies can look like when women step into their natural role of teacher, because they teach in a very different way. I think when matriarchs are portrayed nowadays, they're very patriarchal in their portrayal, because we're not connected to the divine and wild feminine and how she teaches. That's the high priestess. She teaches very different than the hierophant.
Right. Oh yeah. Great points all around. And I know you and I can riff on the divine feminine, divine masculine, and all of that, cuz I mean, to me it's been such a point of healing for me to be able to have more of a grounded view of that, the divine masculine, the divine feminine, how it blends together, why each role is important, and where each role like maybe had a place, and how they even do a swap every once in a while, and who knows what ages there were, when it was matriarchal, patriarchal, whatever. Is it still a matriarchy and it's been portrayed as a patriarchy? Who knows? I don't know, but I know that both are capable of having the rulership of it. And that, I guess, like, that's to me like one of the more important takeaways from it. When I was reading what Barbara Walker was talking about, I'm like, well, maybe that was the case, but who's to say that a man can't be a druid priest and have the power and the magic to do these things as well? And so
Yeah.
it's not about, I don't think it's about one is more powerful than the other, really, at the end of the day.
No, and even in Roman records, the few that I've seen referenced mention both present. The women had their hair all undone and they're screaming at us. The men are there. Like, you have both present. So I don't have any reason to suppose that it was ever just one or the other. You might have your more wise ones and your acolytes, but
Yeah. Oh, totally. And one last question before we start to wrap up here. So the Ogham, the Druidic language, I don't know too much about it. I think it's beautiful and it's gorgeous, and I saw a lot of it in Ireland when we traveled there. But from what I looked into, it's basically what they called it is like a landscape alphabet.
mm,
And so kind of like the each line having something different, like talking about the trees, the mountains, the plains, the sea, wherever your landscape is, a lot of it like translated over to that. So like the imagery around you. But have you looked into it, or do you have any other insights about that language at all? I'm sure you'll be learning more as you're like going on this path, which is really cool. And I look forward to hearing like your opinions on it as you learn. But I just wanted to see where you were at with it.
yeah, I have started just a little bit. I started making my own Ogham trees, but the problem that I ran into were a lot of discrepancies on which letters were which. Because as far as I know, there's only one document that has all of them. And it's written in Old Irish. And unless you can read Old Irish, you're not going to know what they are. The page that I saw from the document seemed like a Rosetta Stone, where there were a few, comparisons with other, with English letters. But some of them are still kind of up in the air on what they mean. So you could be drawing one letter, but really that's not the tree. So you think that this letter is for birch. Well, maybe it's for alder. And so I kind of stopped that until I could really get to the root of it and figure out, what's the best way to approach this language. Because I love that you mentioned it being a landscape, because when it is written out in that text, it is a long ways. Most people say, oh, it's a tree language, so it grows up. But branches don't grow just straight out. So they do grow at angles. There are letters that go in angles, but you have to manipulate them to go straight out. So, it makes sense for it to be more of a landscape, and then maybe those are trees. They go up this way. This tree you think of as its roots, because for some things, the roots are the more healing part of the plant, or one of the part that you might desire most. The bark can certainly be used. But that's where I started to take those studies, was learning about the trees specifically and what their healing properties were. Because that's something I would love to dive into more, is tree medicine. So that part of the alphabet kind of sidetracked me from the language aspect of it.
Yeah. It does make sense, because when I look at it, I'm like, wow, this is gorgeous. I mean, it's beautiful. And that was just one of the reasons why I really wanted to look into it before I talked with you, because I'm like, well, I want to at least have an understanding of what do they consider it to be, like and so anyway, I look forward to hearing more about what you learn as you learn it, because it is gorgeous. And I just think language, as we've been talking about pretty much this whole time, is very important. And what we say and how we say it matters. And it just says more than a lot of people think it does. And so, with all of that said, we're almost at the 2-hour mark. So I just want to thank you again so freaking much for coming on. And this was a really fun conversation. And it went like in all the directions I wanted it to go and then some. So thank you for just sharing your wisdom and continuing to just grace us with all of the things that you do, because it's really lovely. And I'm honored to be able to be a part of your life and witness what's happening and seeing you grow. So, with that said, can you just tell people where they can find you, and anything else you wanted to say to everybody before we say sayonara?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for hosting and having me on and just having the kind of conversation I love having with you. So it was a lot of fun for me. If you want to see any of what I'm doing, I mostly post to Telegram. I may dabble in some other medias. We'll see. Um, Mostly on Telegram. I do have an Odyssey channel that I post to occasionally. And I am on Minds for anybody who's interested in Minds. I don't post as often anymore, but I will post there. So mostly Telegram, Odyssey. That's it. And
Awesome.
spiders. You can find me on Weaving Spiders. I live in
Nice.
your mind.
Yeah, and all of the Rachel's besides it's Minds, like Minds.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. Um,
It's an alternative to Facebook. It popped up several years back. So
okay, cool. Probably look into it though. But
nice.
yeah, otherwise, all of her links are down below if you guys want to connect with Rachel. And yeah, thank you all for being here. I'm gonna let Rachel go, but I have updates for y'all if you want to stick around. So please say hi to Mr. Jim and Pet Scratch for us, and I'll talk to you really soon. And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, have a great night.
You too.
Whoa, that was so fun. I'm so excited we got to talk about this. I've been wanting to pick Rachel's brain more about all the knowledge she holds in these spaces, because there's a lot to share and there's always a lot to learn. And I feel like the more we talk about this stuff, the more we can just help each other learn. And you just never know what you're going to learn when you just set out and start having a conversation with somebody. So I'm going to pull up a couple slides for y'all that I've got. Um, let's see here. All right. So next week's show is James of Family Fungi. Super excited for this one too. I've been excited and pumped for all of the people that I've been having on. So this is a very exciting time for me and for us, because yeah, I feel like we're flowing. We're going with the flow, and it's been really fun and awesome. And I've been just being able to talk to some of the people that I admire and look up to, and want to learn more about what they do. So that'll be next week, January 31st. We're going to wrap up the month with James at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And again, we're coming up on full moon. The moon will be full on February 5th, but until that time, still have just a couple bars of soap left. So if you're interested in trying soap, I still have I've got like 2 more of the oat bars. I have 3 more calendula salt soaps, and I have 4 of the shampoo bars. So just another reminder that I've still got that, and more soap will be coming down the pipeline, because yeah, you have to take time with soap. It takes like 4 to 6 weeks to cure, so you always have to kind of like plan ahead for what's going to be coming. So I'll be having more soaps definitely coming at you guys in the near future. Here is my menu again. Not much has changed on this. Wanted to just highlight the antifungal and wound healing salve. Just made a really nice fresh batch. Ah, shucks. Thank you, legs. I'm so glad you guys like it. I love it too. And elderberry syrup, it's like I love making it. I love working with elderberry, and it's just super fun. So I'm glad you're liking it. And yeah, but the antifungal wound healing salve, like I was saying, fresh batch, just made a couple days ago. So it's really awesome. It's helped so many people over the years. It's helped me. It is a staple in our first aid kit. I know I've brought this up before, but when the Baldersons, when their dog got attacked, that was one of the salves that I had synchronicity, like there was a sync that I had sent that to them. I don't know, maybe a few weeks before that attack happened, and they ended up using it on the dog, and it really did help. I know they did other things too. It wasn't just the salve, but I know that they used that as a protective, as a just to help speed up the healing, and it really did help. And it's helped a lot of people with weird skin conditions, specifically dermatitis and eczema. And I'll go into this whole thing a little deeper at some point. But all of these sorts of conditions, I'm more on the lines of thinking that German new medicine, it really plays a huge role in how illness and disease manifests in our bodies. So without getting into the nitty-gritty of perhaps what causes eczema, I will say that the antifungal wound healing salve has helped a few friends of mine, specifically a friend of mine whose son has had it for about 7 years, and she just kind of was like, "Hey, let's just try this," and overnight had success with his rashes really diminishing and going down, and he found a lot of relief. So not only does it help with wounds, it can help with skin conditions. I've used it on like cold sores and fever blisters. It really does do wonders for just speeding up the healing process. And so yeah, oh, Family Fungi is also saying that Manu had a pretty red butt crack, and I used that after his bath one night. Next morning, it was all healed up. That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. And yeah, that seems to be the case with that salve. So if you guys are looking to have something like that in your arsenal, let me know. Everything else that you see on the menu is available, and you can email me to place orders. That's what I like to do. I don't have like a shop on my website. I kind of like to take that middleman out. So anyway, and because I do things in such small batches, it's really nice to be able to connect with somebody via email and like get their order and stuff like that. So michelleshealinghome@gmail.com for orders. Any other inquiries, you can email me, no problem. I also have consultations available for people. I'm starting to book more of these, which is really exciting. And I'm really just like stoked. So thank you for anybody who's reached out and either gotten a consultation or is booking one, because it means a lot. And it's something that I've wanted to do for years. And the time is now. So that information is also on my website. If you want to know more about the details of what I offer and stuff, you can head to my website, michelleshealinghome.com, and I have a consultation tab, and there's like a video and a rundown of stuff. Also, you can text me if you want, 503-568-1569. And yeah, with all of that said, I just want to say thank you again to everybody for tuning in. What a lovely conversation. The chat was really great. You're crushing too, James and Najla. Thank you. And yeah, it was a great show. And yeah, thanks for sharing your lady with us tonight, Jim, because she's something special. And yeah, that's about it. So I'm going to sign off, say goodnight to y'all, and thank you again. And we'll see you next week. Take care.